Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi everyone. This is Studio Sobascape. I'm Ditika,
And I'm Madhu.
and yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and both of us are basically the two main artists at Studio Sobascape. We do anime illustrations, and at the same time, we also do background design.
Yeah.
So, for today's workshop, we wanted to do a combination of background and character design put into an overall illustration. So today what I'm going to show you is the manual version of the digital background art which I usually do on Clip Studio. But I'm in a new phase and I wanted to try out something manual after a very long time. So I'm going to be using watercolors, inks, and a brush pen with basic water. So the paper that I'm using right now is just general drawing paper actually. So this could be, the 40 rupees drawing paper you can get at your stationery shop. It could be the really thick one, 300 GSM paper, or it also could be any kind of watercolor paper, if you will. It doesn't have to, but just avoid using bond paper. Um, if possible. So one part of doing background design is to sort of understand what is the mood and ambience you want the character to be seated in. So in this particular one, I'm particularly really inspired by foliage, trees, and generally leaves and this the feeling of nature in general. So I'm going to be doing a tree, and I'm going to be showing you the various ways of using contrast, tones, and colors, and how to create variations with one color of ink. So
Mm.
I'm going to show you the ink that I'm using right now. The ink here is this is the Camlin uh, Cobalt Blue 056 ink. Okay, and here I have it in complete concentrated ink color. And in the cap, I've put a little bit of the ink and I've diluted it with at least 2-3 drops through, not drops, but a little bit more of water. So it's a much lighter version than the dark. So I'm just going to show you a test of this. Um, this is the diluted color. So you can see that the color looks like this. It's kind of yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of diluted. It's very light. It's not too dark. Okay, and you can see that the paper doesn't allow the water to blotch also. So it's the paper is good for this. Then the other ink, the more concentrated ink, looks like this. So the beauty about using inks and not watercolor in this case is that it creates this kind of variation and a very defined boundary line. It's the appeal of inks. Even watercolor can achieve this effect, but ink does it very naturally. And I think this was also something that we're trying new and experimenting at Studio Sobascape. So we will discuss more about what is the new artwork also that we're currently doing at the time. So this is the ink that is bought from the store, and I also have here my own kind of concoction of ink that I've made with the help of a friend. So these have blue and green inks. It could be this Camlin ink, or you could use General Parker ink, which is used in fountain pens, and you mix it in various proportions, and you can get a different kinds of blues and different kinds of variations and shades of blue. So I'm going to show you how how this color, this blue looks like. So I think it's yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
So this is a more desaturated purplish sort
Yeah.
of blue, right? So these are the three main tones that I'm using to do this landscape, to do this tree, basically the landscape design. Okay, so I'm going to start. First, we're going to create the light form of the tree. So basically, trees are supposed to be drawn with this sort of shape. And here is where your shadow sort of comes in. It's in this kind of shape that each bush of the tree is constituted. So if you understand how to draw like one of this in that style and practice on this one unit, you can multiply this in several parts and then you can get an overall look of the tree. Okay, so this is how the first part is supposed to be practiced with. You can do it with pencil in the beginning and then maybe move on to the watercolor or the ink. So um, I'm going to show you, yeah, over here I'm going to show you I'm going to do a small tree with this color now. Okay, so when you use the ink, you have to make sure you do it super fast so that it doesn't dry up and create the boundary line. So it takes some amount of practice. And as you can see, the ink keeps getting lighter and lighter, and that's the beauty of how using this color and using this ink as well comes out. Okay, so this is my top bush. Okay, then I'm going to dip again, and I'm going to create now the middle layer of bush like this. So there is no real rule on how it's supposed to how we're supposed to draw it. It's actually more about the feeling. So you have to feel that, oh, this is a little too big of the area of spread. I should make it smaller, or oh, it's too rectangular. I need to make it a little bit more circular-ish, ovalish. Oh, I need to create more openings and cutouts like this. Okay, and you can keep dabbing into the same ink pot and sort of like retouching on areas that were not properly painted on, and always make sure to get this defined outline with the ink, because that's the one that's going to help you overall look at the spread of the tree. So now I use it on the left hand side.
Good.
And to fill in the gaps also in the middle, but some can be left open also at the same time. It creates like this feeling where the branches would come out and sort of you see the branches from between the various bushes.
Mm.
So these kind of cutouts here and here and maybe in this section, these are the things which create this an aesthetic value to it. There are also trees which are like completely filled with the shadow and all that inside, so that also works. But for this, I'm going to give some cutouts so that we can see later on when I draw the bark, we'll be able to see the way the ink and can be used and played with. So the plus point of doing it on the laptop over this is obviously that you have an undo button, you know. But then here, obviously, if you make a mistake, you can't
Right.
retouch up on top of this. You know, you have to really restart all over again. But that also helps you develop some kind of patience and persistence. Um,
Mm.
and at the same time, there is a kind of different kind of control and pressure you get by actually learning how to do use paints and watercolors with brush, which obviously in Photoshop and Clip Studio, the pressure sensitivity and all of that is completely different. So if you have a tablet, you will know what I'm talking about. because it's quite different. So it's very interesting to see how actually you might be having more control digitally than you do manually, but that's the challenge, I guess. And also the effect that you get with watercolor, I mean, ink, is quite is something that I think maybe we still cannot really achieve it on computers just yet.
True.
Um,
Scriptura has a couple of new brushes in their new update that has that same effect almost. It can replicate it, but yeah, the true feeling of the pigmentation and the drying of the ink is still better traditionally done. So, a part of what we are trying to explore this time is to get traditional and digital to sort of switch places or play around with each other. So, while we are doing the background in ink like this, the accompanying piece that goes with this will be done digitally with a brush that mimics this ink texture. So, we have the ink texture in two mediums in a way. So, you can kind of see the difference, but you can also see how it melds together. It's an interesting exercise, we would say, that we're trying to do this time.
yeah. Okay, so I think this is the first layer which is done. Now, on top of this, I'm going to do at least 4 to 5 layers of shadow with the
Mm.
different kinds of inks. So now, with the same diluted ink, from the cap, I'm going to create the second layer on top of this, which is going to be the shadow for these bushes. Okay, so this gives a subtle shadow. It won't be the harsh shadow, which is important because it keeps providing more and more depth to the image. So shadow is one of the most difficult parts, I would say, of doing foliage in general.
Agreed.
Um, and it takes a lot of time to sort of get the hold of it. But I think the only way is to keep referencing different kinds of anime. I think Ghibli anime like Spirited Away or when Mani was there. All
Mm.
these anime have really explored this beautiful background concepts, and they've tried different kinds of trees with different kinds of um, for grass, different kinds of hardscapes, softscapes. Um, yeah, and so the reference material is really a lot if you see these movies. And so you look at the movies and you try to mimic, but in your own style. You try to first mimic exactly how it looks, but then you can start developing your own style when looking at it. And then also one indispensable process is to reference real life examples, like actually going to a nearby tree where you live and observing how the shadow is on the trees, on the leaves, on the overall look of the tree, and every day trying to perceive something new about the tree. So these sort of things are like tool sets to an artist who wants to develop their own voice and their own identity for art. So it's really important to like have real life examples. And so the place that I'm living in right now has a lot of trees in the nearby thing. So I've been doing some forest walks in the evening, and every day being able to witness how the wind blows and how the tree leaves move with the trees. It's just it's all have definitely added to the skill value that I was able to develop with this. So perception and observational quality is really important for an artist as well. So in the different parts, I have like this lower part, the upper, the third layer, the second layer, and then the first layer, right? So this lower layer, I can these kind of variations can be done through several times of dipping in the same position. You know, you keep doing it in the same position several times, but it's through the feeling of the bush and trying to understand where is the shadow coming from, where is the light coming from, and then allowing the brush to guide you actually, and allowing the ink to sort of do what it does, because you cannot really control how the ink moves on the sheet, and that's one of the beautiful parts of this is that you can only sort of slowly move the direction, but it takes its own position. And then sometimes when it gets too dark, you just wash the brush in water. Um, and then you can get like lighter shadow. So this was when I dipped it really strong in the diluted ink, and this was when I dipped it in water and I got a slightly lesser intense color. So now I'm dipping it again in water. And usually the trees on the topmost part of the tree, if the shadow is coming from the top, like obviously sun is always on the top, so when it comes down, it's usually the bottom part which is the darkest and the top portion which is the lightest. So we do that, we translate that in the ink, like how in this manner is by just diluting the inks a lot and then putting the shadow in locations where um, it's sort of subtly creating a shadow, but not too harsh also at the same time. It's like a diffused shadow.
So you start with the most diluted version of the ink and then build your way up with pigmentation.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good.
So even these small areas, these are the parts which add extra value to it. It adds extra quality to it because it's not just a blob. It's these small parts where you add an extra dot of shadow or you add an extra area of highlight. It kind of creates a very holistic image together. Okay, so I think this one is done for the first layer of shadow is done. So now I move on to using the completely concentrated ink as it is to create the third shadow.
You can really feel the foliage right now because of the second layer.
Mm. So yeah, it is about understanding the dark and light parts of the entire tree. It's also about like where you want the dark parts to come, and you put the dark shadow only in those regions. Um, Also sometimes like you have this image like of what you want it to look like, but then afterward when you're doing it, it goes into something else, and that's also completely fine because even now I feel like the ink is already finding its own way of like
Hmm.
um creating shadow and highlight. So I'm also just going with the way the ink is moving. So now I've like wash the brush, and now I try to spread this dark color with water. That's another technique you can use. This already has quite a bit of water in it, so when I put some more ink around it, you can see it's just moving on its own. It
Hmm.
takes the movement of water in it. So that's also another technique you can use. There are some places where you benefit off of the paper still being wet. And then there are some places you benefited of being dry. So right now all of this is dry. So if I want to create this effect again, I have to add more water in that area. Um, for example, this area here, and then I can add this. And having crisp shadow is also another kind of shadow that can be added to this sort of blurred shadow. So this is sort of blurred here because of the mixing of the inks, various mixing of different kinds of with water, etc. And what you will see, for example, after it dries, like in this area, it's quite crisp, the shadow. So, and also here also it's quite crisp. So it's the both of these styles of shadows also add a tremendous amount of quality and depth and detail to the image. So knowing where to apply which kind of shadow will come only through practice. It's really difficult to really explain where which kind of shadow should come because it's actually the ink which dictates that. So when you use the ink, for various kinds of practice the works, you will get a hang of like really knowing how the ink moves with the water. And also, it depends on the kind of paper you have for sure. Some papers don't allow this blotching to take place, spreading of water to take place enough, and some do it quite a bit. So 300 GSM or even 180 GSM papers are like very good to work with. I wouldn't suggest bond paper because bond paper holds a lot of water and it doesn't really allow for this effect, and it also soaks up quite a bit of the color of the ink. and it has a tendency to become desaturated. So you always have a cloth also. Like here, I have my cloth on the side. So every time I feel like there's too much of water or too much of ink, I just like wipe it on the cloth, and then it removes the excess ink on the brush. So if there are any questions, also anyone can ask. I'm okay to answer them if you have any questions regarding anything of this workshop or anything.
Yeah, it's coming together now.
Mm. Okay, so this is the third layer of shadow. So I'm going to do the final fourth layer. So this is going to be with the homemade ink. Okay, this is going to add the very strong shadow to supplement the fourth layer, like the previous layer. So I only put them on the dark areas which I've already used. Add some water. So and then you use water to sort of spread it around. So you get a different shade, like it goes from dark to light and doesn't become dark only in one concentrated area, but it's like using Um, very darkness all around. And now this I wash the brush and I'm just going to use water to move it completely throughout. Okay, now I'm going to dip it again and add it here. Then I wash it and then move it with water again. So this is with water. Like Athara was mentioning earlier, we're currently working on a new art service called Ink Chibi Art Service, where we use ink um, in the background uh, by a calligrapher who we are collaborating with that personalizes the message using different kinds of inks and does an artistic kind of um, writing for any of your titles, quotes, or any kind of passage that you would like to see along with your chibi. And so we have sort of like redone the chibi that we did last year, which is making it look a little bit more on the artsy side and giving it a more watercolor effect. So if you guys are interested, please do check our Instagram handle. We've uploaded the poster for that. And do let us know what you think of the new like art style and what you feel about it. And
Yeah, I think it's been 1 year since we started doing our Sobascape chibis. So this time we're trying out a new spin on it. So again, it's a venture for us to combine traditional art with digital artwork. Yeah, you can check it out. You can
yeah,
upload any picture basically of
so the
yourself.
background is done in ink and the chibi is done on digital platform by using the Clip Studio brushes.
Hmm.
So Atira is going to be showing you that in the next part how that is done. So you guys can see the process video of it. Okay, I think it's coming together and I think it's more or less done now.
Yeah.
The thing about uh, doing any kind of illustration artwork is that we don't really know when to stop because there's always an extra brushstroke and always an extra part that we can add to it that we feel like, oh no, we should add this, we should add that, or we should, add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that. It would, change the overall look. So I guess that's a part and parcel of figuring out the style also of what one wants to do. Okay. So I think
Yeah.
I'm going to put a full stop to this here. Yeah. Okay. So my spread and foliage is done now. Now I'm going to do the bark of the tree. So I think the yeah. So I'm going to use the homemade ink for the bark. And so when you want to add shadow, you just keep dabbing on that spot again, and then the ink will sort of blend itself into the previous ink pattern that was already created there. So it's actually kind of doing the job for your ink. Yeah.
Mm.
And once it dries is when you see the overall effect.
Mm.
Yeah. I think this is done. So let us see the branches, how it's going to look on the pockets here, which I created.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I think I will close this here. So let's put some flying um, leaves.
Leaves. Mm.
Yeah. So I think this one is done. Then
Mm. Cool.
cool. So thank you guys for watching this. So now I think Atara can handle
The
the
chibi.
character. Yeah.
Yes. Cool. So I'll share my screen here. Yeah, I think I'm there. Okay. So this is my Clip Studio Paint Pro, and I have a couple of references on the side here. These are just some ink chibis that we've done already. That one's me, and this one's Deepika. So I'm just going to use that as a reference when I make the character for this particular landscape. So we'll just start with doing a very simple rough sketch of what Didika has already done, since that's the background. And yeah, so something like that. It looks much better when she has done it, but yeah, I think this works. So yeah, so I think we can have a chibi sort of just sitting here in the bottom, maybe like that, and leaning on the grass, legs folded. And since she had drawn some blossoms flying out, we could have her trying to catch some of them, like that. Yeah, she's looking up at them, like that. Yeah, cool. So let's try and draw the chibi now. So this is just a rough sketch, so it doesn't have to be super accurate. Since she's looking up, I'm just putting out the perspective. And I like to start with fleshing out the shape of the face, because chibis have that very distinct bulge of a cheek. I usually start with that and build my way around. Yes. Nice around here a little bit. What? Yeah. And then we'll just put some cute little hairstyle. That. Okay. That's the main face. Now for the body, think round shapes, because a defining feature of a chibi would be something that's super round. So you don't have a lot of hard edges. You have everything that you have is built around circles. So work with circles that way. Now, since you're sitting down, we could have our legs folded like that. So little toes. Yeah. Yeah. And when the arms are basically just broken down into oblongs, basically. And then you just build your shape around them. That. And since you is holding some, take some of the blossoms or the leaves, you can have her holding out her hand like that. Yeah. So yeah, I think we're good to go with this. Now you can correct your proportions here itself, actually. So you just keep an eye on basically how the head to body ratio is, based on how you like it. So you don't have to be super neat. You can do that when you're doing the final line art, basically. So yeah, now when I press Control B, I change the color of the layer over here. You can see it. Anything I draw in this layer would be now that, despite the color I've chosen. I usually use this for my rough outlines. Then I reduce the opacity so that it's like barely visible, just visible, so I get the basic shape and I have my wireframe almost. And yeah, now I think we can just do the line art directly. I usually have at least 2 to 3 of these layers, maybe 3, 4 if it's a very detailed chibi or a detailed character. But for something this simple right now, I think this is good. And especially since our chibi is going to be of this size, we don't have to worry too much about the final details. Yeah, so do the final thing. Yeah, and what brush I'm using, pen I'm using is, I can't read Korean, so oops. But this is a brush I downloaded from the Clip Studio assets. They have a lot of people uploading their stuff there, so you can check it out. Yeah, this is one of my favorite brushes. it's super cool for sketching. You can see that the opacity changes based on pen pressure. So that's the one we'll be using for this. And you can keep your stabilization at full or max. For rough sketches like these, where I want to do quick circles or quick lines, I used a very low stabilization. And for clean lines, I do a stabilization at 100. So that's what we use for our line art, basically. Yeah, let's start with the hair a little bit. Let's work our way around. Since the background is super, does not really have a line art, I think we can keep it slightly light and simple. So I'm putting in really very little pressure to get a very simple line like that. Okay. Work my way around the shape a bit. Give her some big eyes. So through our shapes, we've changed a bit of the design from last time. Learned a lot from drawing a lot of chibis over the 1 year. So just a couple of design changes we've made, like you can see here. This is my basic reference. But maybe something like that. If you don't like the position, you can change it around. Change it up. And being super easy with the lines. Just that. Then fill this up. Yeah. This is good for a pass. Pushing this a bit. Yeah. That's pretty good. Okay. We settle the shape of the cheeks by flattening this out of the groups. Yeah. Like that. Again, think round shapes as you make your lines. Everything is pretty soft edged. You don't see a lot of sharp ends. You can make an exception for hair, but chibis come in different styles. So this is something we developed over the time. And it's changed a bit based on the ink chibi style that we're trying this time. So yeah, super customizable. Cute hairstyle. Pretty happy. We with the body. Use the shape. Actually have very tiny hands, so extracted it to something like that. It looks a bit muscular, but that's yeah. I think probably the main features are the thumbs and the pinky finger. It really adds to the cute factor. Yeah. We just draw her feet. I mean, sorry, her legs. Mm, With tiny feet this time. Our previous designs had slightly bigger, more detailed shoes, but this time we're going for a more abstract style. So small and petite, like that, or something to this effect. Pretty good. I think this is fine. Watching the head to body ratio that we have chosen. Usually chibis are pretty, again, based on the artist. Some chibis would have like really big heads like that and really tiny bodies and not even proper hands, like not even defined fingers, but some would have pretty evenly proportioned bodies. So it's basically up to what you think is cute and what you think is nice. So we're trying to go for a more realistic almost, but cherubic. So yeah, just watch the segments of the body to help with proportion basically, where you observe these parts and these parts with each other so that within the same drawing you are in proportion. So I think this is pretty good for a small, like a
Mm.
liner. Yeah, pretty good for a liner. Okay, I think we can start the coloring. Okay,
Yeah.
this is where it's like really fun, super fun to do. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep the line art on now. Okay, so usually if your line art is super closed and neatly tied in, you can sort of select the whole thing. But since mine has sort of these gaps in the middle as a part of the line art style, I have to manually just sort of select it. So what I'm going to do is take a solid brush and then just trace around the shape. I'll explain in a moment why I'm doing this. It just helps a little bit with the coloring or at least staying within a boundary. So we can play around with the consistencies inside the chibi and not so that doesn't spill out too much. I've just chosen a random color because eventually I just want it as white. So I'm going to lock this layer here. You can see it's locked and I'm going to fill it with white. Now this is going to be my base. So I make a group now, and then I put it to clip layer. So what happens is every layer that I put inside this group is going to be within the boundaries of this white layer. So I'll show what happens. So here, this is me drawing something. As you can see, because it's in a clipped folder, you won't see it anywhere else. While if you switch off the clip, you can see the lines are going everywhere. So this helps you have a overall boundary to do that. To it helps you with coloring. So this is something we tried out. Now, okay, so we'll start with the skin. So after Clip Studio updated itself recently, it has uploaded a couple of really cool brushes. So this is under the Indian ink category, this wet blotting ink brush. So it's super cool. Okay, this is what it does. Like you see, sorry, not there. Yeah, there. You can see that. That's what it does. It is basically. Oh, sorry, it's just saving itself. Yeah, it is basically mimicking the blotch effect of ink, which is basically like what Ditika just did, or an extent of what Ditika just did with natural inks. You can replicate a bit with this particular brush. Obviously, it has its limitations because the edges are pretty rounded, so you cannot get your very fine tips like that. But it's pretty cool to have that really textured feel that, like you can see from here, easy to achieve with this brush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start filling in the skin color now. This brush is all about pressure sensitivity, so just the slightest touch changes the concentration of the ink. You can just play
Mm.
around with it slowly and carefully. Here
So this
too,
is like the first coat that I
yeah,
was doing in the ink thing. So yeah, this is
exactly.
like the light coat. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to have these slight white patches because it just adds to the color elements that like the lights
Mm.
and stuff. Super cool to try out this brush, especially for people who are in love with traditional media. This is a brush you can like completely go bonkers with. It's super fun. And it also has a blending mode of its own. Like instead of changing the properties of a layer, you can change it of the brush itself. So I'll just show you what it can do here. So for example, I have the skin here. If I set it to normal, it just piles up on top of each other. It's not exactly interacting with each of my layers beneath. But if I do a multiply, it darkens itself, as you can see. And if you change a color and try different colors on top of it, it changes. So you can see the difference here, right?
Mm.
So you can play around with that. So many types of variations. Like for this one, I think we can just go for multiply. That will really help with coloring. You don't have to worry about these parts because for the hair, we'll try a different thing. Now, if you feel some parts over here are sort of a little chunky and you want to smoothen it a bit, you can try the blend tool here. You can either press J or you can just go to this particular icon, use blend. Slightly, you can touch up these corners if you like a little bit. So you don't lose too much of the texture and then you can still have something a little smooth. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of a shadow thing here, like that. Pretty simple, pretty organic. Again, it's pretty close to mimicking how any ink brush works. Yeah. And another thing I like to do is add a blush layer, which is like you can take a really pretty pink or a red and a very light color over here in the color wheel, play around with it, and then just sort of just where the elbows come in and where the cheeks are, you can add a little bit of color, you can add a little bit of a blush like that. Yeah, if you feel it's too much, you can blend it out a bit. I like to add some near the ears as well. It's the part of the stylization we are trying out. That, yeah. Okay, next. You can try something for the lips as well. You can pick around your own canvas actually. If you hold down Alt, you can just pick around your own canvas. And because this brush is very responsive to pen pressure, even the lightest color creates such a big difference. So yeah, you can just do that. Pretty good. Then now for the eyes, just going to erase this part a bit because I don't need it. Blush here, I can use it. Yeah. Now the eyes are pretty fun, let's say. You can use any dark color, I would say maybe a brown. So we can play around with it. Okay. You go over one pass like that. Like, where is your pupil? You put it where the pupil is, basically. So since we have, the Ditika has drawn a few of those cherry blossoms coming in, she's focusing there. So I would say like the pupils come this side. So you put one pass, then you build another pass, and then you build another pass, and you sort of build a pupil on top, and then sort of go around it a bit. Pretty simple. You can maybe darken this a little to get a little extra definition. And then just to change it up, you can add like a different color here. Now, admittedly, they look a little scary, but that's okay because the main part of the eyes are the dots of white, the shine basically. This adds a whole lot of life to the eyes, completely dyes it up like that. And then underneath the eyes, you can add the whites to get that shape. Oh, cute. Okay. Can even maybe add like a tiny bit of shine, maybe highest points, that extra cuteness, I guess. Yeah. Now the hair, I would repeat the same process as we did with the base, like here. So what I'm doing is, I think with the hair, I can fill it up. So I just used the magic wand tool and then just selected the line art layer here and then just clicked on it to get this selection because the hair is pretty closed. Then I fill it up with white as my base. So I don't have to worry about the skin bleeding through. Now I do the hair on top of this in clip. So now, because I've clipped this to my hair base, whatever I paint in the hair base will be only within that shape like that. So this helps a bit with the coloring. Now, I would say the hair is the most difficult part to get right, at least. But yeah, it's pretty much runs on feeling. Sure. Something like that. You can build a bit on it based on how your shadows work. But yeah, something like that. Pretty cute. If you want, you can blend out some parts gently with the blending tool there. If you feel some parts are too glaringly seen like that. Yeah, you can go over one pass. Yeah, okay. And just fill in the eyebrows. I think that's pretty good. Yeah, and now if you want to change maybe the color of the hair, you can make another layer, clip this as well. So it doesn't mean it's clipped to the color layer, it means it's clipped to the overall layer in the bottom. The more layers you have stacked on top, they will all be following this boundary here, the white boundary. So I'll just put another layer and just select this space and fill it with a color for now, just a random color. Set it to maybe overlay just to see how I can change the color of the hair, maybe to something that fits our background a bit more. Since Ritika has used blues, we can make it a slightly more cooler hair color like that. And if I don't like the brown that I've used, I can use Control U and then just change the color here. So maybe try something like that. Basically play around with it. And yeah, we can adjust the darkness basically like that. We can adjust the saturation like that. I think this would be nice. Something this, yeah, pretty cute. Yeah. And then next we'll do this. Okay. Just erase this part off. Have to keep a little bit of white here too. Yeah. On the wrong layer. Always keep an eye on the layer because yeah. Cool. I'll just blend this a bit. Cool. So just make some space for this dress. Okay, I can give her something slightly bluish tinted, maybe. Maybe slightly more pink tinted. Have fun with the brush, basically. It's a relatively new brush, so we've had some time to play around with it, test it, feel how it responds to pen pressure. So it might depend on the type of tablet you're using and the tablet settings you have. I'm currently using a Canvas 13 graphic tablet with the display screen. So it's pretty good. It's got a really good pen pressure to it. So even the slightest touch, it really responds very well. Yeah, just sitting there. Try out something like that. Yeah, pretty cool. Now you can go back and edit some of your colors. So the skin color, maybe I can try something a little bit more saturated. A few more details. If you want to maybe apply a color to your line art, you can try the clipping method again. So maybe you want to change, make it a slightly softer color. You can fill it like that. And it changes the color of your line art. If I switch this off, you can see the difference. So thought we could try something a little bit on the blue side because again the landscape that Titika had just finished was blue. We could try responding a bit to that. Yeah, that's the chibi right now. A couple of finishing touches here and there.
Looks really cute.
Yo, this is super quick because we've gone pretty basic with the detail.
Basically, you use one brush throughout the entire process, right?
For coloring, just this
Coloring, yeah.
one brush. So like, oh, oops. Nothing should come between the clipped folder and the base because the moment you put any layer in between, you just lose it out. So, oops. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the brush I'm using for skin, and this is the brush I'm using for the line, basically. There's this which I can't pronounce because it's in Korean. Yeah, I think that should be it.
Yeah.
Cool. So what I'm gonna do now is save it as a PNG file, basically, and send it over to Ditika, and she will place this chibi on the landscape. And yeah, and then maybe do a little bit of editing here and there, and maybe change the maybe fit, make the chibi fit a bit more to the whole thing. And yeah, I think we're done. So
Cool.
I'll just put in a little signature here. Oh, this is my stabilization. Oops, it's saving. I think we're done. Cool.
Yeah.
Ritika, you can take it over. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can start sharing my screen.
Yeah. Now Ritika will be showing her screen where she has already, I think, uploaded the tree that she drew onto Photoshop for editing, where she'll combine the chibi with the
Yeah.
landscape.
So is I think my screen is being shared right now, right? Yeah. Okay, so this is a picture of the tree that I taken on my phone and now I have placed it in Photoshop. So I do the editing of combining the chibi, that's the character, along with the background, mostly on Photoshop because Photoshop has added editing tools which I find more convenient to use. And I'm going to show you how we can sort of create a harmonic background to combine a digital character with a manually drawn background. So, just to do the editing of this, um, I'm going to remove some portion of this using the lasso tool or the polygonal tool. Um, basically, only basically cut out the parts which I don't want, which is this, and then use the marquee tool, which is M, to delete other portions which I want, like in a larger area. Okay, then I can increase this in size. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to patch up the parts which have been cut out, to make a more blended background. So I really like this color of the brown in the background. It's kind of giving it a very vintage look. It's also giving a very subtle look to this. So you can actually the reason why it's come out this quite brown is because of the lighting that I took the picture in. So in case you want to have a white background with this landscape, all you have to do is to download an app called Cam Scanner, and then you make sure you have white light, like that's focused on the image itself without any shadow, and then take a picture on your smartphone using the app, and then you can save it as a PDF, and so that can be transferred like to your email, and then you download it and to your laptop or your system, and then you can put it up in your editing software and then edit it out. So it becomes easier if you want a white background in that case. So I will just go ahead with this. So what I'm going to do is use a brush tool. So I have this unique brush. So the brush set is basically from the default Photoshop brush set. It's called wet media brushes. Okay, and I already have them here in my panel, and I'm using I think 104 or yeah 104. So what we do is we just color pick parts of the background and fill it up. Okay, the parts which we want to blend out, we're going to blend out using the brush itself. To just keep creating variation, because this also creates a sort of effect that like this. And if you want a more blended background, sorry, then what you can do is you right click on your brush and you have this thing called mixer brush tool. So what it does is it mixes the foreground and background color that's existing in this. So the mixer brush tool is using this as a brush which I was using for another artwork, but this works here as well. So I'm going to use this this is my foreground, and then we are going to try to blend it. Okay, so I think it's in the dry mode. We have to use very wet mixture. Then you can see how it blends in like this. And by the way, I'm using a mouse. I'm not using a tablet. So for people who don't have a tablet, you can still sort of practice, your mixing skills, your brush skills, and all that with your mouse. It's still possible.
Hmm. Yeah, it's blended pretty well.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it like this. I think this is settled.
Hmm.
Okay, and then we're going to do the same for the top. Oops.
Yeah, that's blended pretty well.
And then we can use a soft brush to sort of even it out a little bit more using the dark color here. Yeah. Okay. I think this will do. Okay, so what we will do is we will also increase the levels of this image to get a little bit more clarity and depth. So I increase the brightness. Then the contrast a bit. Okay. Now let's add the chibi in this.
The one on top. Just refresh it.
Yeah. create blend in this image. So for that we use a brush tool. I'm going to create a layer on top and to sort of mimic this the grass sort of sitting on grass. Right. You can put on overlay and then add some shadow around. So yeah, this is right. So the chibi itself we can change the layer mode to darker color
On top.
or and then like maybe darken. And I'm just going to try to edit the levels to get it a little bit brighter. Then I think let's change the layer mode to something okay. Then we need to erase the background so that we can, make a CD. So what we do is in the background layer, this is the part of editing where I use a brush tool to and pick a color from the background like this beige color and then fill in into the gaps. Yeah. Then I think uh, this is basically it. If needed, also an overall layer of levels can be added in the adjustment as an adjustment layer. So this can create the overall brightness and overall darkness. Same method. It's okay. Yeah, so I guess this is the overall illustration competition then.
Yep.
So if anyone has any questions, regarding some kind of doubts or anything regarding software or generally anything, we're open to answering them now. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for the wonderful
Sure.
workshop, Thira and Deepika. That was Studio
Thank you.
Sobascape with
Thank you for
an
having me.
exceptional
Thank
illustration
you.
workshop. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
So, ending the stream now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Check out our Instagram profile and our new art service.
All the links will be linked in the description, and you'll have the video to share with your friends.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.